Hello and welcome to FICCI Presents Decoding Budget 2022, powered by CNBC-TV18. On the 1st of February, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented a growth-oriented budget amid continued disruption from COVID-19 and rising inflation. Budget 2022-23 aims to steer the economy by laying the foundation of Amrit Kal, charting a path of India at 75 to India at 100, with key focus on fast-tracking the economy, providing growth opportunities to businesses, and creating 6 million new jobs. Agriculture, healthcare, MSMEs, infrastructure, they featured prominently in the budget speech. To discuss some of the big ticket announcements, we've got a special panel with us today. Let me welcome Shailesh Pathak, Co-Chairman, FICCI Transport Infrastructure Committee and Head Special Initiatives Development Projects L&T, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Chair, FICCI Higher Education Committee and Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis International University. Pranav Saita, Chair, FICCI Taxation Committee and Partner and National Leader, International Tax and Transaction Services, EY India. We also have with us Jasbir Singh, Co-Chair, FICCI Electronics and White Goods Committee and Chairman and CEO, Amber Enterprises, and Dr. Alok Roy, Chair, FICCI Health Services Committee and Chairman and Managing Director, Medica Synergy. Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin with Mr. Shailesh Pathak. Mr. Pathak, I'd like to ask you about the Gati Shakti program. At the beginning of her speech, the finance minister spent a considerable time speaking about the Gati Shakti plan and outlined the government's vision on how the Gati Shakti plan will unfold. How do you think this is going to give a boost to economic growth, job creation, and also drive demand, which is the big need of the hour? Tell us how this infrastructure push is going to help this economy.
The Gati Shakti program is more like a national mission on logistics. And as we all know, logistics is all about moving a person or a product from place A to place B in the least cost and in the least time. And that has been one of the weaknesses of our economy, that it takes far too long and it costs far too much to do logistics in India. So how does the Gati Shakti National Mobility Master Plan help? It uses the seven engines of mobility, which is roads, rail, airports, ports, mass transit, waterways, and logistics infrastructure, and actually puts it all together in a portal which is accessed by 16 ministries of the government of India. And the underlying framework is by the Space Applications Center in Ahmedabad, BISAG-N. The good thing is that this National Mobility Master Plan under the Gati Shakti plan is now getting state governments on board, because that is where the construction of these infrastructure projects would happen. And very soon, we will have integrated implementation of such infrastructure projects in mobility. One of the four things that we wanted from this budget was coordination. And Gati Shakti is all about coordination and much better implementation. Thanks.
Points, Mr. Pathak. We'll come back and speak to you more about the infrastructure push, but let me get in Dr. Vidya at this point. Dr. Vidya, the budget also laid a lot of emphasis on digital education in the pandemic era. What would be some of the big takeaways for you, and how would they impact our education system?
So one of the biggest takeaways, I think, of this budget, specifically in education, has been the digital university. And, we all know that through the pandemic, we've all shifted to online education. And online education needs a lot of support, not just, the way we deliver education, digitally, but I think it's more important to also look at whether it reaches the unreached,
Right.
which means, she also spoke about optical cabling, privatization, and ensuring that it reaches the most rural areas in the country. And I think if this happens, it's really going to give a boost to the increase in the gross enrollment ratio, which is dismally low right now as you compare it with the international standards. We just have a GER of 27.1% and the ambitious plan of taking it to 50. And this is going to happen only with digital education. So a central digital university with a hub and spoke model, I think that was the need of the hour. We will see, of course, how it gets implemented, because finally the spokes are going to be in the different states. And I hope that they also look at the private sector coming in a big way, when it comes to online education. The other is, of course, of school education, where they've increased the number of channels, TV channels, to 200 for the PM E-Vidya. Again, a very, a noble thought, because I think in the rural areas, there are children whose parents don't have smartphones, and, it's very difficult for some of us to even extend school education to that part of the country. And I think through the mode of television, I think that would be the best way to reach out. So overall, we are very happy with the whole digital push, and it was absolutely anticipated.
All right. So you're saying the digital push was absolutely anticipated. We'll speak more about the initiatives in just a bit. Let me get in Mr. Jasbir Singh also right now. Mr. Singh, design-led manufacturing scheme for 5G. There have been duty concessions on a range of electronic products. Let me begin by speaking to you about the 5G sector. How is this going to give a boost to the 5G ecosystem, which is at a very nascent stage in India? We've been speaking about collaborations with different countries. There are conversations going on in the private sector. But what is your hope from this scheme? The government has announced an intention to bring a scheme like this. What would be your expectation?
Well, actually, I think this is a budget of New India, and 5G technology is definitely happening now. And what we were lacking in the electronic sector was design-led manufacturing, and there was no impetus or incentives based on the design-led manufacturing, especially on the electronic side. 5G technology, design-led manufacturing is a right time announcement, and I think this is going to, in fact, initiate a lot of R&D capabilities in within our country, which actually we were outsourcing from outside in the neighboring countries. And it will also help us achieve the self-reliant India initiative, by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi.
Uh, Dr. Roy, let me get you in right now. How do you see the outlay for the health sector this time around? The Prime Minister was speaking some time back, and he said that the world is at a turning point because of the pandemic. We are speeding up our vaccination drive as well for 15 to 18-year-olds and all across the country for other age groups as well. The Economic Survey has spoken about vaccinations being a macroeconomic indicator as well. So how do you see the push for health infrastructure in the budget?
I wish I could share the optimism which Mr. Jasbir and others have expressed. Healthcare industry, which has been battling COVID-19 pandemic since last 2 years, was expecting more investment on public health. However, the very fact that government has focused on digital healthcare shows that finally healthcare sector is being considered as a prerequisite to ensure economic well-being of the country. India's growth is estimated to be 9.27%, and healthcare will play a major role in the boost.
Okay.
Economic survey indicates health spending has
Correct.
significantly increased to 2.1% of GDP. But this is not so true for healthcare direct investment. This includes spending on water, sanitation, and nutrition as well. So obviously, it's much lower than 2.1%. So this has not seen any increase from the last year. Given that budget this year has focused on infrastructure and capital expenditure, the budget for Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission under central and state head is a welcome move. It's good. It will boost the infrastructure growth in the country in the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. This would help provide a much specific focus, indeed. But healthcare is a lot about operational losses and operational cost, not just the infrastructure. That's something which they have missed it here in including. The decision to start an open platform for national digital health ecosystem is a very welcome move. This is in line with the overall digitalization of the economy, especially when coupled with enabling 5G services across the country. It was expected that the government will look at increasing the public health infrastructure expenditure above 2.5% of GDP.
Dr. Pranav Saita, let me begin by asking you about what the budget means for the average taxpayer on the direct tax side. Do you feel the budget could have done more? Tell us about some of the initiatives that were announced by the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman. How will they impact the common man?
The way I look at this budget is it's a budget of stability, continuity. It's not tinkering around with too many things. I think what the government is signaling is that we had to do various things over a few years. We've done them. Now we want things to settle down and continue in this manner, in a stable, predictable, consistent way.
All right.
So that's the message number one. The second, I think, is the message that it's forward looking in terms of the thrust that is there on digital technology and so on. But if you ask me in terms of for the common man, is there anything in particular which is in the nature of a freebie? I could probably find one or two things. Other than that, very little in terms of any additional benefits, advantages, and so on. Maybe NPS for state government employees, which is raised from 10 to 14%, could be one. Or for long-term capital gains other than listed shares, the surcharge has been capped at 15%, could be another. But otherwise, by and large, it's continuity and stability that I am seeing.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our special broadcast. FICCI presents Decoding Budget 2022. We're discussing the sectoral impact of the budget. Let me now go across to Mr. Pranav Saita to speak about the cryptocurrency sector. A taxation policy has been announced for this sector. We don't have an overall regulator or regulations yet. There is no bill which is going to be brought in the budget session of Parliament, but there is clarity now on how the government plans to tax this sector as well. How will this augur for the cryptocurrency sector in India? And do you think that what the government has said by way of taxes on income from cryptocurrencies, TDS, capital gains, will this also apply retrospectively?
Let me first go into the crypto tax itself. As we see it, it is a very unique form of taxation, and it has all the inefficiencies that a tax can have. It's almost, other than cost of acquisition, no other expenses are to be allowed. It has to be ring fenced. It cannot be set off against any losses. Its own losses cannot be set off against other income. So it's a one-way tax. If there's a profit, I get taxed. If there's a loss, I don't get an allowance of the loss from the crypto itself. No carry forward is allowed. So all kinds of inefficiencies, I think, have been built into the way this tax has been constructed. I'm not too sure what exactly might have been the provocation for it. Maybe that's a way of discouraging this. Maybe it's a way of, at least that's what the official version is, that it's simple and it gives complete clarity of how the tax works. That seems to be the official response. But I'm not too sure that it's the most efficient way of taxing a person, so to say. This tax will take effect, of course, only from financial year 22-23. The difficulty is, therefore, that while this tax becomes effective only from financial year 22-23 from the income earner standpoint, the investor standpoint, from the tax deductor standpoint, or for TDS, it gets effective from 1st July 22. But for the income earner, he has to declare it for the year April 22 to March 23, the financial year 22-23, under this new form of taxation.
Would also like to get in Dr. Roy once again to speak about the health sector. There was also an announcement on the setting up of mental health centers. The FM spoke about how COVID-19 has also had a toll on the mental health of people. How do you see this playing out, sir? What kind of clarity would you be expecting?
A very good question. Mental health has been the biggest worry, and the government has handled it very well. Setting up mental health telemedicine 22 centers with Neemhans from Bangalore and one or two more institutions will only give access to the people seeking the mental health, and it's much needed. And pandemic has really shown us that mental health needs more focus. The only thing is that the what they have done. See, in mental health, the incremental value which they have provided is very small. If I see it correctly, the earlier outlay was, the increase is just 10 crores. So it was probably 585 or something, and now it has gone up by just 10 or 12 crores. I haven't got a figure with me right now, exact figure, but I know for sure that the increase is just 10 crore, which is not really doesn't look like that it has been thought through. And how are we going to implement it? What will happen? We'll have to see the fine prints.
Dr. Vidya, were there any points which you felt that the budget could have covered and would be among the misses for you when it comes to the education sector in India?
Yeah, actually, there wasn't a mention about the national education policy and its implementation. I think the last budget, Madam did mention about it, but in the whole of last year, I think there were committees formed to ensure how this NEP could be rolled out and implemented in the different states and
All right.
obviously different universities across the country.
Okay.
So that I feel that maybe a mention of how and what kind of resources would be allocated for the implementation of NEP did not come out.
Okay.
To skill development, which is again, a big force that will help the economy to grow, where she did make a mention about upgrading ITIs and looking at skill development courses, giving them an impetus, and more specifically, I think on urban. Which didn't come out last time or ever. This time there was a strong focus on urban planning and urban design, and she did speak about centers of excellence being created across the country. So that's again a good move. I think a differentiator from what was spoken in the last budget.
Let me also get in Mr. Jasbir at this point. Mr. Jasbir, just to ask you about some of the duty concessions that have been announced in the budget on parts of transformers, mobile phone chargers, camera lenses. Tell us about how these duty concessions, especially in electronics manufacturing, are probably going to translate. Will that translate in lower costs for consumers?
Parishit, actually, if you see, a lot of components were getting imported into India, especially for wearables, for mobile phones at a larger custom duty. So, which was making our finished goods manufacturing or stroke assembling here very uncompetitive as compared to our other neighboring nations. So, this move of lowering the custom duty on, especially on the components, that is a very right move for creating the whole ecosystem of manufacturing of finished products here.
My final questions now, Mr. Pathak. Let me begin with you. If you were to sum up the budget in about 30 seconds, if you can give us your reaction, how do you rate the budget, the hits and the misses?
Parikshit, this is a budget for a 5-day test match. It's not a 2020 game. It's designed to take the next 5 to 10 years of the Indian economy. And, one of the things that is not being talked about is this ULPIN,
Okay.
a unique land parcel identification number in urban India, which will actually put a lot of our property related disputes away. So all good as far as we can see.
Dr. Roy, if I were to ask you, how would you rate the budget? The key thought that you would like to leave us with?
Mr. Parikshit, if you ask me to rate it, we are disappointed. Because for simple reason that you cannot have a economic growth if people are not healthy. This pandemic has shown us that we need to have a very resilient healthcare delivery system. Government system has to be very robust. Please remember, 70% of healthcare is delivered out of pocket or in private setup.
Okay.
And when 70% of healthcare is in private setup, that means the boost to promote private setup is one of the most important decision a government has to take, number one. Number two, they'll have to work on their public health.
Dr. Vidya, your final thoughts, if you were to sum up the budget in about 30 seconds, how would you rate it?
Yeah, I would rate the budget good for education because the move from face-to-face to digital was the requirement. And I'm very happy with this budget, certainly. And it looks like, there is a serious thought that, we need to kind of include and, do the mass education as what, will happen through the whole digital impetus that has been given in this budget.
All right. Mr. Jasbir, your thoughts on the budget and how would you rate it?
I think it's a budget of a new India. I would say the foundation stone for India at 100 has been laid. Overall, a very good budget.
Okay.
Though a very little misses, maybe some import duties increases were expected out of consumer durable sector. But that's I think as the other panelists mentioned that it's a forward-looking budget, And I would say overall a very good budget.
All right. Mr. Saita, your final thoughts?
So overall, I think it's a good budget, and if it's going to be a trendsetter for the way things are going to continue going forward, continuity, stability, and try and give clear messages to the taxpayers of how the budget is going to go forward so far as India is concerned, rather than keep making large changes just for the sake of change, that would be a good sign for all time, I would feel.
All right. We've reached the end of our broadcast. That's all we could pack in. We'd like to thank all our special panelists for joining us, giving us their insights, and explaining what Budget 2022 means for the industry and the common man as well. You've been watching FICCI Presents Decoding Budget 2022, powered by CNBC TV18. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.